Good afternoon, distinguished guests, participants, and partakers. I'm extremely delighted to open the first week of International Faculty Development Program on Literature, Society, and Thoughts, an effort towards sustainable development. Through this program, we aim to explore the ways in which literary scholarship across the boards might engage with and contribute to the well-being and sustainability of Earth and its inhabitants. Today's session, in the same lieu, intends to bridge feminist scholarship and its pervasive influence over nature and culture. To help us understand the effect of feminist critique of happiness and its relation to the environment, we have one of the most sensational feminist voices navigating female matter in question, our dear Professor Nishi Pandey, ma'am. Ma'am is the celebrated professor of Eminence, Department of English and Modern European Languages, University of Lucknow. She is the recipient of the fourth Flow Women Awards of Uttar Pradesh 2018-19 for Outstanding Women in Education. She has also received Rani Lakshmi Bai Bravery Award by the Government of Uttar Pradesh and Saraswati Samman 2013 by the Government of Uttar Pradesh. Ma'am's academic and administrative achievements are inspiring and empowering. Being your true blue student, ma'am, I'm extremely proud to host you for today's session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I'm very, very grateful, Vanya, for this invitation. And as I begin, I would like to just quickly relate what I'm going to talk today. The topic given to me is Feminist, Killjoy in Literature, Political or Strategic. But the overarching theme of this week-long session is on literature, society, and thought, efforts towards sustainable development. So if we just broadly look at the Sustainable Development Goals that have been taken up by the UN, I will quickly want to list it, and for all of you to notice and focus on what affects us as women. So the first one is no poverty. Second is zero hunger. Third is good health and well-being, which is also there for women, not just for men and children. Quality education, also an issue for women. And the fifth one, which is the most important, is gender equality. Today's talk would focus on gender equality. What are the processes that the feminists have taken? And then what is it that we are facing now? Where do we stand now at the beginning of the 21st century as talking for gender equality? Then there's clean water and sanitation, affordable and clear energy, decent work and economic growth. Another issue that has to do with women and their status and what they are given and what they are deprived of. The ninth SDG is industry, innovation, and infrastructure. And the 10th is reduced inequalities. When we talk of reduced inequalities, we're definitely talking about the dimensions of class, gender, sex, sexual orientation, etc., which again comes into play. 11th is sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption of production. 13th is climate action. Life below water is the 14th. 15th is life on land. 16th is peace, justice, and strong institutions. When we talk of strong institutions, the patriarchy operates just in every possible institution, including marriage. And so this is another one of the developmental goals that needs to be addressed. And finally, partnership for the goals. I'm going to be talking about feminist killjoy in literature. And I've already listed how what I'm going to talk about affects how the sustainable development goals go forward in the world in the future. Now, who is a feminist killjoy? And I identify myself as a feminist killjoy. And therefore, I'm speaking for those who have tried to question patriarchal norms and how in the process of questioning patriarchal norms, we've been labeled as killjoys. So feminist, feminist killjoy is a term which is used to describe an individual who raises uncomfortable questions, the necessary truths, and the unpopular opinions. So, if at home I've ever questioned why a brother must not do the same amount of work as a girl in the house, why a boy was allowed more time to stay out and I wasn't. Everybody thought I was a troublemaker, that I had an issue with everything. So if you can imagine yourself in a situation where you are raising questions on very relevant patriarchal problems prevailing in your family, you are first and foremost accused of destroying the family peace, not only in the private realm, but in society also, in the public realm. If you are sitting over some inane dinner conversation that is going on and you want to make a point, or you make a point, even if you make it gently, you are looked upon as a killjoy. So if you raise a question on a problem which is gendered and pervasive, you will be accused of posing a problem, you will be accused of complaining, or being a feminist killjoy. So this term feminist killjoy is a term which therefore describes individuals who raise uncomfortable questions. The term was highlighted by a very important feminist scholar and independent writer, Sara Ahmed, who works on the intersections of feminist queer race studies. And she was working at the Goldsmiths University of London, Goldsmiths College in the University of London, and then she resigned. And she resigned because she felt that the institution was unable to deal with sexual harassment, which was prevalent in the workplace. And then she began to write her own blog on feminist killjoys. Now she's written this book called Living a Feminist Life. And I quote her when she says, when you expose a problem, you pose a problem. It might then be assumed that the problem would go away if you would just stop talking about it, or if you went away. So if there is a problem and you say something about it, a large number of people will believe that just stop talking. Don't have to point the problem out, almost as if the problem is going to go away. So if you talk of gender equality and you are looked upon as a killjoy, and then people imagine and believe that that will go away and that it will not be, the problem does not exist. That's not true though. So the whole process of how do feminists kill joy? Why use the word kill joy? So feminist killjoys are those who are interrogating systemic problems. And they are told to hush themselves, keep yourselves quiet. Do not create a mountain out of a molehill. Do not cause any unnecessary disturbance and other people in other people's lives and in the system. So the primary question that we need to ask here is, for those who are seeking gender equality, why do people try to muzzle the feminists and the feminist queens? Why is society so fearful of what the feminists want? Why is it considered derogatory to be labeled a feminist? All my life, people have said I'm a feminist, and I've said yes proudly that I am a feminist. There are multiple kinds of feminisms. There's radical feminism. There is a feminism which is rooted very deeply in an understanding of life, of women, of their status in society, which may not be very radical, but you still need to open your mouth, you still need to speak, you still need to be able to articulate what is wrong, you need to pose those questions. And so what happens with feminist killjoys is that they disrupt the smooth functioning of an age-old system, an age-old practice within the patriarchy, which is of advantage to men and which marginalizes women. And not just women, other genders, people of other class, people of other race. It happens. So feminists not only question or disrupt the smooth functioning of these systems vis-a-vis women, but also class, race, gender, sexual orientation. So it has now in the 21st century come to feminists speak for all these. And if you look at literature, whether you look at writers like Toni Morrison, or you look at any major writers, whether it was Virginia Woolf, whether it was Mary Wollstonecraft, in the modern times, they're all being looked upon as killjoys, as if they were, because they were posing these questions, because they were documenting the status of women. So most of these women writers who have brought issues to the forefront have been seen as killjoys. The term was not there then earlier, but they were always asked to hush up, be quiet. So whether it was Simone de Beauvoir, or if you look at all the modern writers, they are all killjoys in one way, because they are disrupting through their questioning the smooth functioning of an age-old system and practice, which is of advantage to men and which is marginalizing women, and of course other genders. So a problem which is affecting marginalized groups is brought to the surface. And therefore, people in power, they have to step up and address these issues. And I would like to quote something that, we need to, okay, I'll quote that later. So when the majority of the people in society are flourishing under the shelter of patriarchy, anyone who tries to disturb it, anyone who tries to disturb the system becomes the source of problems, and then becomes a feminist killjoy. Why should any man want to give up his power? Why should the patriarchy want to let go of the power? Why should they give opportunities where they can be dominant and they can have an upper hand? That's not something they will want to do. So this inconveniences patriarchy immensely, and for all others who hold power. Therefore, they shift the burden to the person who is asking the question. It is very easy to snub or hush down or shush down an individual by accusing them of spoiling our mood, of being unhappy. You are unhappy, therefore you're always cribbing. You're unhappy about everything. So women who ask questions, feminists are run down and said, oh, they are mood spoilers. Rather than, actually addressing the problem at hand. This is what mainstream patriarchal society does. So the problem itself then does not remain the center of attention. The attention shifts to the person who's asking the question and the person who speaks up. And that person needs to be sorted out and fixed by the people. How do you do it? Telling them to shut up. Be quiet. Don't raise issues. Don't be a killjoy. Don't do this. Don't do that. And people take this, women who want to articulate, for fear of being labeled a killjoy, do not come forward and want to speak, even when they understand that there is a point where they must speak for their own right, for equality, for equal opportunity. They are not able to voice it because we are so gripped by this whole notion of having approval of the other gender or the male or the majority, which is patriarchal. We are so seeking approval. We want validation from our father. You're a good daughter. You're a good mother. You're a good wife. We are constantly seeking validation. And then when we want to articulate and speak about something, people want to fix us and tell us to be quiet. Don't create trouble. Don't be a problem maker. So Sara Ahmed, in one of her books titled On Complaint, she says, and I quote, I want to give room to complaint, to listen to complaints, in order to counter a history that has become routine, in which those who complain are dismissed, unable even to bear witness even to their own experiences. You're told to be quiet, even if your own experience prompts you and is prompting you to say something. So, so standing up against certain primordial issues, favoring a particular section, will invoke a prejudiced reaction. So for women and feminists who articulate, speak, question, disrupt, It is a draining experience to be constantly branded as someone who kills joy. And I can say that from personal experience too. But the important questions and interrogations that are of significance and importance, not just to me personally or just to one person, but to all and to all women, must be asked. So being a feminist or asking questions is not the root cause of the problem. There are systemic, layered, generational dynamics to how patriarchy will manifest itself in public and private spheres. So you feel wronged by being perceived as in the wrong just for pointing out something that is wrong. That's what Sarah Ahmed says. Supposing you are addressing an issue that angers you, the emotion of anger will be accompanied when you elaborate on it. So your anger and frustration and the way you speak about the issue will serve as an evidence about the fact that you are angry and frustrated. So you get upset about something that's happening, and supposing it's about another woman and the way she's being treated, or someone is treating her badly, if it angers you, that anger reflects. And when that anger reflects, it's enough for people to say, oh, she's an angry and frustrated woman. So people feel that the very issue behind the veil of these particular emotions will disappear. And Sarah Ahmed says, quote, "It is frustrating to be heard as frustrated. It can make you angry that you are heard as angry." I'm neither frustrated nor angry when I'm making a point, but others will point it out to you that you are a frustrated and angry person. So when the majority of people thrive and bloom under the shelter of this larger shelter of patriarchy, and majority, almost about 80% women are still under the, shelter of patriarchy. So if another woman comes along who tries to disturb the system, she becomes a source of a problem. She becomes a feminist killjoy. So why would anyone like to step down from their position of power? Why would they like to give up their opportunities? Sometimes when you play into the patriarchy, women are given these little tidbits and given a little bit of power, and they are patronized all the time. And, they can have a little bit of upper hand with the person who's at the center of the patriarchy. And therefore, they do not naturally stand up against certain primordial issues favoring a particular section. So because they are scared of that prejudiced reaction. And then this whole idea that if you're constantly labeled that way, then we don't know where to go from there. We don't know how to be able to then renegotiate for a space for ourselves. But we have to be addressed, and we must make sure that the solutions are formed. And at the risk of being called a feminist killjoy, we must keep asking inconvenient questions, relevant questions, pointed questions, questions that disrupt. Before I come to discussing what Sarah Khan has actually said, I would like to share with you something interesting. Because as students of literature and as people who are involved with literature, I would like to draw your attention to an author called Erin Wunker. And she, of course, didn't invent the phrase. It was the phrase was invented by Sarah Khan, but she has written a book literally titled Notes from a Feminist Killjoy, Essays on Everyday Life. And it has been released. According to Wunker, she says that a feminist killjoy is a person who's a paradoxical figure. And then she says, quote, "who takes pleasure in the work of interrupting the patriarchal norms that pass as joys." Right? So feminist killjoys will be what? They will be women who are critical. Not just women. Killjoys could be feminist. Killjoys could also be men. Let me say this here. Men who lobby for, who articulate and argue for and question and pose the problems and pose pose those disturbing questions about the issues of women are also called killjoys. They're also called feminist killjoys. So it's not something that is only a term that is used only for women. It is also therefore male writers, male authors, male members who support the cause of gender equality, which is one of the sustainable development goals, and for equal opportunity for women, which is again a part of sustainable development goals. So feminist killjoys, man or woman, they are very critical of the happiness derived from the oppression of women. How do you feel oppressed in society? Off-color jokes, always making a joke at a woman, either at her size or her weight or her height, or also at the way she looks, how she ages. Ageism comes in, how she ages and then she's all saggy and gone. Men discuss this all the time, and they make off-color jokes. Jokes at the cost of women are also there. Women are like this is how they control men, this is what they do. So a lot of off-color jokes, group who enjoy it, so they're getting pleasure out of it, and their joy is being killed by a woman who questions this. Similarly, old man's club and old boys club. There's always an old boys club having beer, talking of women, talking of the way they're sexually oriented or their sexual experiences. And so this goes on. So the old boys club is, if you listen to the kind of conversation that goes there, if a man wants to disrupt that, wants to question, wants to pose the question of why women should be spoken of like that, they are also perceived as killjoys. So, there are, so what are the others? There are expectations of how women should look, how women should act. There are many comments about women, about Muslims, sometimes about a burqa, sometimes about a niqab or hijab or anything. You talk about black, you have people making comments on Muslims, on black people, which gives them some joy, on Hispanics, the marginalized, disabled people, old people, and other groups, made by one person who is at the center of the patriarchy. He is like the president-elect, and he is talking all the time, and they are participating and partaking in all those activities which gives them joy by laughing at these people or creating jokes or deriding them or, just enjoying power over them. So Erin Wunker says, and I quote, "A feminist killjoy will not tolerate casual instances of racism or classism. She won't keep quiet to maintain a smooth dinner conversation." Right? And Wunker, of course, is a professor of literature at Acadia University. She wrote the book in part as a series of essays which were dedicated to her daughter. That set the tone and sentiment of the book, but little snippets, vignettes of thought, theory, and criticism mixed in with pop culture references and memoir. That is what makes the book, as she worked through early mornings and things while her infant daughter was sleeping. And in one of the interviews, she was asked, what does a feminist killjoy do? So, and she replied, and I quote, "A feminist killjoy calls out and refuses to be complacent with the so-called joys of patriarchal culture. It can come in the form of an uncomfortable holiday dinner conversation where you have to say, well, actually, family member, you just made a racist comment. So it can also come in the form of speaking out among your friends or public places, or speaking out, whether it is speaking out in the media." She was also asked what kind of jokes, for example, she was actually asked this question on what kind of jokes can be problematic. And she just gave a reference that in the US election, when white women voters voted for a racist white man like Donald Trump, it was in some way an act of enabling white supremacy. The fact that white women overwhelmingly voted for Trump instead of a woman, there is a clear indication of the ways in which we learn about patriarchy and misogyny, because patriarchy operates largely through women. And these norms and the socialization process is also largely in the hands of women in families, within the families. So because we get born into it and we learn those systems. So we look for someone with power. If it's a woman, you say, that can't be right. A woman can't be saying something right. Let's ask daddy, let's ask someone, let's ask the boss. If a woman in the office says it, you say, let's ask the boss. If the woman is the boss, you will again cross-refer to another man. So in her book, she has argued that patriarchal culture is so pervasive that it's almost invisible. And there are moments in time where she feels where we get a clear snapshot of the depth of racism and misogyny. And the US elections, where Trump won and Hillary Clinton lost, is one of the most outstanding examples of how it gets revealed. So, she says that, and I would like to quote her on this. When she talked of the US elections, she said, I quote, "I've spoken to friends in both Canada and the US, and my friends of color are not so shocked at the results of the election as my white liberal friends are. I'm white, and we don't live the same kind of everyday oppression that people of color do. I was shocked at the degree to which misogyny and racism are thriving in the United States, and the degree to which dis-ease and disenfranchisement got channeled into people thinking the only way they could act was to vote for Trump." And she said, "I'm undone by it, really, shaken more than surprised." So, why I'm reading this to you is that when the elections were on, as a feminist and as a thinking person, I was so confident, so confident. Everybody said that Hillary could win. I said, no, she won't. And they said, why? And I was able to give this argument that even 80% of women are still being controlled by the central figures of patriarchy. How do you think they're going to go out and vote? So what is happening here is, and the point that I want to make is that what is this, for us to focus on the characteristic of the feminist killjoy. One of the major characteristics of a feminist killjoy is the desire to make change. She's willing to take this label of being a feminist killjoy because she so desires change for those who are marginalized. So what is it where people should turn their attention to? So if you look at us, most of us are living under the overarching umbrella of capitalism, whether it's the United States or it's Canada or it's even India. Capitalism is very much there. Of course, we are a socialist. We do look at things, but capitalism is something that we constantly keep aspiring for. So donating money to organizations that are threatened is one way in which we can make change. Then, other things, Black Lives Matter and other organizations, where on both policy making and community levels, making people's lives becomes more equitable. So we have to move through grief, not to accept anything. We have to roll up our sleeves and find more energy to fight for equity. There's a beautiful image, if many of you may have seen it on the net, of a woman wearing a little scarf. This is from a tin box in which she's got her hand like this. She's wearing a little red scarf, and there's an American woman. She's appeared on some advertisements, and so for empowerment of women. So that's exactly how it is. We have to move as killjoy feminists through our grief, through our suffering, through our experiences. We don't have to accept. We have to roll up our sleeves. We have to find more energy, and we have to fight for equality. Now, there's also this whole issue about friendship among women, and whether the significance of portraying that friendship is meaningful and positive. So why is it important? And Erin Volka has given a beautiful answer in one of the interviews that she gave, and I will quote her. Shine theory, Shine, shine theory is what we need more of. It is a term that writer Anne Friedman coined. Shine theory is a way of combating toxic narratives of friendship. If you see a woman who's intimidating because she's so awesome, make friends with her. Celebrate and cite her work. Circulate her work. Make friends instead of giving into the visceral reaction of jealousy. Now, this is something that, unquote, this is something very important. We say sisterhood, and yet we envy, we are jealous of women who appear intimidating because they're constantly disrupting and questioning that which is wrong in society. They're questioning that even on dining tables. They're questioning that on their work tables. They're questioning it amongst friends. They're questioning it among people of their own gender. Sometimes you're questioning it even with women. And instead of being with you on board, they are reacting to it. She had written this book that I was talking to you about, Notes from a Feminist, Killjoy, Essays in Everyday Life, when she was pregnant, and then finishing it after her daughter was born. So she writes their notes to my daughter, and she has, and I would like to quote what she had to say during that interview. I ended up writing in the small snippets of time I had. In the process of writing this book, which I did between January and May of the year she was born, I noticed that not only did her arrival in the world structure my writing time differently, but my relationship with writing and what I felt responsible for doing differently. If I'm writing a book about feminism and I've just given birth to a child that is gendered female, then I'm writing this book towards the world she is going to grow up in, and hoping that it's going to be different. Now, I would like, I hope that this has kind of put into context what modern women are writing about it. I'm not focusing on the works of Mary Wollstonecraft or on Virginia Woolf or on Simone de Beauvoir or any of the other modern feminist writers. You're all aware of it as students of literature. I'm only trying to take you through what is being written and talked about in the 21st century. And one of the things that is being questioned is by women like this, by Sarah Khan, Sarah Ahmed, who's actually amazing, the way she's come up with this whole theory, and Erin Volka and others. So when Sarah Khan talks, she's trying to bridge the gap or bridge. She's a scholar who's bridging theory and ordinary life. And the pervasive myth that feminism originated in white culture. By the way, Sarah Khan is of Indian origin. So Sarah Ahmed is of Indian origin. And she has said, quote, feminism is a sensible reaction to the injustices of the world. She is a self-declared and described feminist killjoy. She wrote a book, Living a Feminist Life, her latest work. And she considers how her own understanding of feminism has developed as a way of making sense of what doesn't make sense in her life. So at a time when public scholarship seems to be a thing of the past, she is offering us a model for what is a modern incarnation and what it might look like. So her book is deeply grounded in theory, but it is equally grounded in her personal, day-to-day life, filled with story from Ahmed's everyday, her experience of being a feminist at work. Theory can do something for you. It can make, it can do more for you the more it gets closer and it gets to your skin, she says. Theory can do more than the closer it gets to the skin. So being just theorists doesn't help. You have to actually incorporate it into your life and go forward. And she tells her readers that demonstrating that good theory, useful theory is generated from and should be relevant to ordinary life. So for Ahmed, she is a scholar, feminist theorist, and she's a queer woman of color. The personal is institutional. And I told you she had resigned from the Goldsmith College because she felt that, in London, because she felt that, actually she was there as the founding director or the inaugural director of the Center for Feminist Research. And her leaving was in protest because she felt the university's failure to address the problem of sexual harassment on campus. And in a blog she wrote, her blog is called feministkilljoys.com. If any one of you are interested, you can go ahead and read. She writes, and I quote, "You have had hundreds of meetings with students, with academics, with administrators. You have written blogs about the problem of sexual harassment and the silence that surrounds it, and still there is silence." I completely agree, and this resonates with me so deeply because my 40 years on the campus, and there were issues of sexual harassment and we tried to work them out. It is amazing that what kind of a deep struggle there is even today, and how the patriarchal framework closes in against a woman and closes in around the man to support him or to make sure that he comes out of it. And I innumerable experiences in which I have seen that happen. So she then moved out, and then she set an example, and then despite our protests, there is still silence. But should we carry on? Of course we must, because there will come a time when they will be forced. They've been forced to do so many things in India if you look at it. Sexual harassment at place of work, issues have come up, the law has come up, it has been made mandatory to us. At least there are some headway we are making. So we have to chip away, keep hammering. Every single generation has to keep chipping away to make the difference. It is after this that, she started writing the blog post. And when she was writing the blog post, the idea for this book, Living a Feminist Life, was born. And the name of the blog was Feminist Killjoys. It is talking of a cultural trope that she has examined in an earlier book of hers in 2010, which is titled The Promise of Happiness. And in that, she examines the idea of that figure along with the unhappy queer, the angry black woman, the melancholic migrant, to demonstrate how our Western obsession with acquiring and maintaining happiness can be problematic for those whose experience interrupts the happiness narrative. So who should be happy? Does a marginalized individual's happiness not matter? Who decides that which happiness is prominent and central? Obviously, within the patriarchy, the ones who wield power, their happiness is important. So if their happiness lies in a joke, if their happiness lies in an act of cruelty, if a happiness lies in taking people's opportunity, so be it. Because their happiness is important, not the happiness of the person marginalized. So, Here she says, to be a killjoy, in the opening of the book, I quote, is to open a life, to make room for life, to make room for possibility, for the chance. Extremely important. To kill joy, to kill someone's joy who is problematic, is to open life, to make room for life, to make room for possibility, for chance, for those who are marginalized and whom the patriarchy pushes aside. So this reclaiming of the word or the term killjoy struck a cultural nerve. And she now has over lakhs of followers on Twitter and everywhere, and she's being considered someone important. And so when I was asked to talk about, in literature, whether it is political or strategic, if you are listening to my talk, you'll see that it is not just political, it is also strategic. Because if women want to negotiate for the space for themselves, they need to be able to pose the questions. They need to disrupt. They need to be, questioning what is happening with them. Why? How? Why not? Why gender equality is not something that is being given to them. And when she was writing this book, Living a Feminist Life, she always kept feeling like having aspects of her own experience explained to herself. Like she had conversations with the male colleagues, the dynamics of being a brown person, because the dynamics of being queer in an academic space, while also being instructed on how to resist and how to interrupt those structures at work in the future. So the book is extremely interesting for those who want to, and they must read it, because the book ends with two refreshingly practical tools. One is a Killjoy survival kit, which suggests categories of items one might collect to help to sustain your own feminism, and a Killjoy manifesto, a kind of mission statement for intersectional feminism. And these are eminently shareable, and you can pass them to friends, colleagues, and students. I suspect I'm not the only one, there are many. Ahmed has, in a very important interview given to Guernica, a journal, she talks of the relevance also of how and what it was to become a feminist. And she says, and I quote, I describe the process of becoming a feminist as a bumpy process. You bump into a world as you begin to realize that it does not accommodate you. You become conscious over time of how things are not what they seem, how stories that you are told for your own enjoyment narrow down what is possible, especially, but not only for girls. Once you are a feminist, once you come to identify that word as your own, it is as though you are switched on, and that being on is your default position. And all that you encounter, all that you consume, that you do, becomes something to be challenged, questioned, resisted. It can be exciting to become attuned to how things have taken a shape in the way that a story is a shape, how things are not necessary or inevitable, how they are open to being challenged, how we can create alternative stories. But it can be tiring, always being on. And there is no doubt that sometimes we wish we could just switch off and watch a movie. In a way, you could use permission notes. I put some in my Killjoy survival kit. You can give yourself permission to turn off when being on is too hard. This does not work always. Sometimes you might be tired. You just want to watch a feel-good movie. And when the Killjoy comes up again within you, which is to say you become her, you can find yourself questioning and critiquing things again. Since sexism and racism are in the world, we need to engage with the world, know it, understand it, if we are to transform it. We cannot withdraw from sexism and racism, and we can be engaged and even enjoy what we challenge. Sometimes being a feminist killjoy can feel like you are getting in the way of your own happiness. And if happiness means not noticing the injustices around us, so be it. But that's not the only way of telling a feminist story. Because apprehending the world from a feminist point of view is apprehending more, not less. Living a feminist life helps to create a more complete picture because we try not to turn away from what compromises our happiness. Of course, sometimes it can be tiring being unhappy about so many things. But I find joy in the fullness of living a feminist life, though not only and not always. Now, she talks of a survival kit, which includes texts that have agency in your life and propel you forward. And then, you know, she was asked whether there are texts or works or of art that she's discarded along the way because they don't fit into the survival kit. Um, he says, that kits, we assemble the kit as we go along. And we work out what helps. They pick us up. What is it that gives you energy? So by virtue of the nature of your own feminist memory, you take what you want and you put into the kit. And she says that when she was a teacher, she taught Audre Lorde's book titled Sister Outsider every year. And so being an academic for 23 years, she says that it has been I quote, it has been a joy to witness how her words reach those who pick up her books, especially Black women and women of color. Lord shows us what is painfully familiar and yet can somehow remain obscure. I think of how she calls racism and sexism grown-up words. And I think, yes, we experience something before we have the words for it. And once we have the words, we become attuned to what it was that we experienced. And further, thinking from the point of view of my journey as a feminist academic, I guess there were some texts that are part of what we might call feminist theory that I found disappointing. These might be the texts that bracketed the question I thought were important. For example, texts that did not engage with the question of racism and sexism within the academy, and even implied that questioning racism and sexism is an overly negative or knee-jerk response to the bodies of work. Those kinds of texts, she says, do not make it to my kit. And then she says that I'm not going to name them, not which books they were, but sexism and racism, she says, are philosophically interesting. We generate knowledge from working out the mechanism of inclusion and exclusion, including within the academy. So she's actually talking of being an academician, and most of you who are doing the FTP are all academicians. So in the academia, sexism and racism is extremely deep-rooted. So all feminists are students in one way or another, she says. We have to study the world in order to transform it. We will all assemble different survival kits. I encourage each student to assemble a kit of their own. I have a lot of books in mind. Other feminists might find companionship elsewhere. For those of us who found feminist company in books, I think it is helpful to ask ourselves what we want from those books. We can want different things, of course, and we do not always know what we want until we find it, sometimes in a manner of what finds you. I think of companion books as those books that make me feel less lonely, and also those allow me to meet myself in a different way. So, before I conclude, can I take 5 extra minutes, please? I would also just like to focus on something, because we are all Indian academics who are here. There is a question that is getting asked here, because her parents immigrated from India, and she calls out this pervasive mythology. We all think that feminism originated in the white culture, but her parents were the first feminists. Her father was probably the first person she ever heard articulating feminist ideas. So she talks about this, and she said, I will just quote her a little, and then before I end and take questions if you want. I quote Sarah Ahmed, I've learned a lot from reading feminist work on the role of white women in empire. At Lancaster, I used to teach on white women missionaries in India. We need to understand how feminism was historically used and is thus usable as an imperial project, saving brown women from their culture and patriarchy. Gayatri Spivak's diagnosis of the imperial mission in her 1988 essay, Can the Subaltern Speak, as white men saving brown women from brown men, remains precise. Additionally, imperial feminism can take the form of white women saving brown men from brown women from brown men. We still witness all around us how feminism is narrated as an imperial project. Even anti-racism can become a discourse of white feminist pride. What white women can give us by overcoming their whiteness. If feminist agency is found in whiteness, then the passivity and helplessness of women of color becomes the occasion to demonstrate this agency. As we know too well, Muslim women are assumed as passive, oppressed, and in need of being saved by feminists who seem curiously more concerned with other women's liberation than their own. Coming from a mixed religion, as well as mixed racial background, I have come across this assumption because it was often used as an explanation of my own feminist story, that I was lucky to have lived in the West. Otherwise, I would not have become a feminist, or that my feminism came from my mother's English side. Exposing what's wrong about this case reveals the problem with assumptions. My Pakistani auntie, a brown Muslim woman, was my first feminist teacher. It is her voice I hear when I hear the word feminism. She did not need to be saved. She was one of the most strong-willed women I have ever known. This is not just my personal revelation. This is about showing how racism works as an assumption of who is passive and who is active. The binary of passive and active is racialized as well as gendered. If we challenge the distinction, we change the script. The assumption that feminism travels from the West to the rest can mean that you just do not notice the transit that moves in the other direction, that is, from us to them. We have to interrupt the feminist story by changing how we start a conversation, by starting with those who found feminism in a different way. So if you're looking, she's making such important points in her book and her works. She's one of those authors whom we really need to be able to read. And I will, before I end, just want to quickly, the principles that she talks about, of a Killjoy manifesto. There is a Killjoy manifesto, and a Killjoy manifesto is, something that if you refuse to be judged, and if you refuse to accept you are judged as being selfish, as putting your own happiness before the happiness of others, and people ask you, how could you do this? So what does a Killjoy manifesto mean? And Sarah Ahmed says that if you're willing to refuse these appeals, then happiness is not the principle you uphold. So, and then to expose happiness myths is you have to be willing to be given a Killjoy assignment. So principle number 1 in the Killjoy manifesto that she puts together is principle number 1. I'm not willing to make happiness my cause. Principle number 2, I'm not elaborating. You can look for this online, you'll get it. I'm willing to cause unhappiness. Principle number 3. Within this, I'm willing to cause unhappiness. And she says, if feminism is a bubble, we need the bubble to burst. Principle number 3, I'm willing to support others who are willing to cause unhappiness, right? And then the next principle, let me quickly come to it. Principle number 4, I'm not willing to laugh at jokes designed to cause offense. Principle number 5, I'm not willing to get other histories that are not over. Principle number 6, I'm not willing to be included in. Inclusion means being included in a system that is unjust, violent, and unequal. Principle number 7, I'm willing to live a life that is deemed by others as unhappy, and I'm willing to reject or to widen the scripts available for what counts as a good life. Principle number 8, I'm willing to put the hap back into happiness, the hap back in happiness. And principle number 9, I have this whole big document which you can always get on the net. I just wanted to share these. Principle number 9, I'm willing to snap any bonds, however precious, when those bonds are damaging to myself or to others. Principle number 10, I'm willing to participate in a Killjoy movement. If it is a movement, I'm willing to join it. So if you look at what we've covered today, what I've actually wanted to do is to tell you that it is not a question of whether it is political or it is strategic. It is both. Because when you talk of politics, the politics of power, gender inequality promotes the politics of power, the supremacy of one over the other. And when we talk of gender equality, it is this disbalance that needs to be changed. You cannot change what is happening in the politics of power or in politics or in society unless you have a strategy. So being a feminist killjoy is something that needs to be a part which is both political and strategic. And if as women of the 21st century, we need to make a difference and a change, I think what Sara Ahmed has done is to articulate for the 21st century multiple things, including this whole notion that white feminists need not believe that the brown feminist is learning from them alone. So in India also, we've given a big, I'm focusing a lot of my research on the multiple levels of feminism that exists in India within the family system, whether it's the rural level or the urban level. And there are women who've stood up, there are women who've gone out, there are women who fought it in their own ways. And there have been feminists, there have been men who have supported it without the patronizing. So in the context of what this lady writes, and within this whole framework, I think it is about time that we became feminist killjoys, men and women. If we are looking at sustainable development goals and we are looking at issues of gender equity, and we're looking at issues of reducing inequalities between the rich and the poor, between class, between caste, between race, gender, sexual orientation, we really need to become feminist killjoys. Because when you talk of class and caste, you see the feminist movement itself has within itself encapsulated and taken within it all of these intersections. They exist. And so as women, we have to find our voice. As men, we have to become killjoys. And then alone could the sustainable developmental goals for a society that is equal, which is reducing inequality, which is giving equal opportunities, which is giving women education, which is giving the marginalized good health and well-being, which is strengthening our institutions, which is bringing peace and justice, which is focusing on partnerships. So many of these sustainable development goals get achieved if we talk of gender equity, if we talk of, and to me, this seems to be one of the most, most successful ways of being able to make a difference, to be able to be heard, and therefore, hoping and wishing that my talk today would have given you people the idea of how you must become killjoys. Do not be disturbed by it. Do not feel marginalized by it. Do not let it disrupt you. Continue to disrupt. Then and then alone, ask the difficult, problematic questions. Then and then alone, could gender equality, equal opportunity be achievable for our world? Thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take it.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for a trailblazing lecture. And I'm sure our participant must be as thrilled as I am. Dear participant, the session is open to questions. If you have any, we have one question, ma'am. I'm highlighting it on the screen.
Feminist movement itself is against gendered hegemony. So how far this added metaphor killjoy would make a new difference in the lives of females? Hope it is not pedantic or just to create a sensation. See, whenever a new, this whole now, we tend to over intellectualize everything in the academia. We have this huge notion that, we must say that it is just someone is speaking just to create a sensation. Here is a woman. So when Gayatri Spivak wrote, everyone said at that time, a large majority of them, that, oh, what are they talking about? When, when Virginia Woolf wrote, they said, oh, this is just to create a sensation. By saying that, the metaphor of killjoy is a totally new topic, and we need to discuss this and talk about it. Separately, I can't begin to give it within the framework of this answer, but I believe that when women, you see this, she's important, Sara Ahmed, because when she talks of the killjoy movement, a lot of women keep quiet, shut up, and retreat. If you have to keep moving forward and creating a space for yourself, the argument that Sara Ahmed gives is an argument that is acceptable, that sits easily with you, and I can say this out of experience. I have not written a book on it, but when I read Sara Ahmed's work and I read the other authors who are talking of the killjoy movement, not just for women, but also for men, it gives us an opportunity to understand that it is irrelevant what they're thinking, and that the center that they are, those centrally placed are not going to decide what joy means. Joy means something even to those who are marginalized. And I'm very, very sure that it will make a great difference. You wait and watch, even in critical theory, because she's also talked of other things. She's talked of herself she's talked of the academia a lot, and being a part of it, being queer, being, she has come out and said because she's brown skinned. So this whole idea that, white women were saving brown women from their men, or that the entire concept of feminism comes from there, it doesn't come from there. It's just that they've articulated it before. So she's also disrupting all of this, which is important, and I think it is there to stay, and it will add a lot to the academic discourse in the years to come. It's not sensation.
Thank you, ma'am. We have one more question. I'm highlighting it on the screen.
Yeah. Thank you for this excellent session. Thank you very much. What's your opinion about switching of the killjoy switch while we are tired? How the society perceives the period and how we should handle it. Okay. So, how have I handled it? Maybe when I'm watching a movie or something, I'll give into it, but then nobody else is privy to that private moment of when you turn the switch off. And you may decide to turn the switch off briefly. If people do not need to, you as an adult must know how people should perceive you and how they should look at you. So what I'm trying to say here is that those moments don't have to be public. So you can switch off. I also switch off. I'm not a feminist all the time. Sometimes I enjoy just a romance for the sake of enjoying it, because that's the way we've grown up. Boy meets girl and the girl is all subject. Sometimes you just, inanely just sit and watch it. That doesn't mean you're not a feminist. But it doesn't mean that every single movie that you look at, you will not allow yourself to enjoy it because you're looking at it through a particular prism. You can let go. You can switch off and then switch on again. So after I've enjoyed the movie, in my mind, of course, there is that this was this and that, but then that's how movies are being made. And occasionally, if you want to enjoy it, that's it. We enjoy Hindi movies. I thoroughly enjoy movies. And those are my moments when I turn them off and I say, all right, not a feminist anymore, just enjoying the film as a piece of art. Yes, it's gendered, it's prejudiced. If it's very highly gendered and prejudiced, well and good. So when I saw a movie like Pink, I switched myself off, yes, but then it was making such a big statement. And so you're not required to handle it publicly. You handle it within yourself and develop the processes for handling it.
मैं यहाँ से क्लोज कर दूं कहीं भी.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Arina Nazneen to propose vote of thanks.
Thank you, Vanya, for giving me the opportunity to propose vote of thanks to the Professor of Eminence, Professor Nishi Pandey, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Your lecture, as always, has given an ingenious insight to the pervasive struggle of women and nature. Your fire's deliberation on the role of patriarchy in enslaving anything unmasculine has started a new debate and dissection of new crippling forms of subordination with the principles described by you. No words of gratitude are enough to acknowledge your assistance and contribution to the success of our program. Thank you so much, ma'am, to be the part of us.
Thank you. I'm ever so grateful. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. You have accepted our invitation to be here.
Thank you.
I wish to extend my deeper sense of gratitude to the Honorable Chief Patron, Founder and Chancellor, Professor Wasim Akhtar Sir, Patron and Pro-Chancellor, Professor Syed Nadeem Akhtar Sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Javed Nusrat Sir, who allows us to get a platform to organize this event to edifying our knowledge with a commendable talk on the subject. I'm running short of words to express my deep appreciation to co-patron Professor Haris Siddiqui Sir, Registrar Integral University, and Professor Akil Ahmed Sir, Director, Human Resource Development Center, Integral University, for being the torchbearer, guiding and encouraging us for all levels for the successful organization of this program. I further wish to extend profound regard to Dr. Shahid Ali Khan, Dean Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, who had highlighted the directions for taking this program into a new light. This vote of thanks would be largely incomplete without special mention of Professor H.M. Arif Nadwi for his invaluable support and contribution to ensure a memorable success of the program. Just as importantly, I express my sincere appreciation to the backbone of the program, our dear participants who have joined us from various national and international locales. Their presence marks a great coordination, cooperation, and motivation for us. Lastly, I would like to acknowledge my associates, the organizers of this International Faculty Development Program. I apologize if I have missed out on somebody. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you very much to be the part of this event.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.